Energy media readers, everyone knows now that on Friday, the federal government announced $1.7 billion for orphan well cleanup and inactive well cleanup in Western Canada, combined with $750 million to reduce methane emission reductions from oil and gas production. To discuss that announcement, I'd like to welcome Regan Boychuk, who is part of an organization that represents landowners around these wells. So welcome to the interview, Regan.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with just give me your response to the announcement.
I think it is heartening to see this issue of oil field cleanup put center stage and firmly on the public agenda where it's long deserved to be. That part is heartening. There's some positive details within there. There's some things we didn't know we'd see for sure, along with accountability and oversight, which is encouraging. But at the root of it, the biggest part of this 1.7 billion has very few meaningful strings attached to it, and is a direct transfer of federal dollars to the province when it comes to inactive wells, wells that are idle but still have owners. And so it's very generous from the federal government. We should be grateful for such a big injection of money when there's so many priorities. But how that money is going to be spent and how effective it's going to be in cleaning up wells and putting people back to work is now up to Kenny, and that's where our attention should be focused.
So I know you've expressed some concerns about the fact that this the money will be spent essentially or distributed by the Alberta government, and you're a little worried that Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, will not do the right thing in terms of spending it all on well cleanup and remediation. What's the basis for those concerns?
Well, it's not that the money won't be spent on inactive wells. That's a very clear intention of the feds. There's going to be a joint provincial federal panel overseeing the spending, both at the Orphan Well Association and the $1 billion inactive fund. Both can have oversight, watching over them to make sure they're not spent on bonuses or anything else. But the concern is our recommendation had been to honor the polluter pay principle, that this sort of support needed to be a loan that was paid back by industry. It would seed money that could leverage private spending to multiply the effects of this. This $1 billion isn't a loan. It comes as a straight transfer from the federal government. And so it's not using all the firepower. That $1 billion could be multiplied dozens of times, leveraged private spending on it. The feds didn't do that. Kenny still could. And so unless industry is going to pay back this $1 billion, it is an insult to the polluter pays principle. And that's the root of Alberta law, federal law. And without that principle, we can't solve this problem.
Yeah, fair enough. I've heard it said by some analysts that I've talked to that this basically lets some bad actors off the hook. Now, having said all of that, the bad actors we're talking about are primarily the junior oil and gas companies, the companies that are producing less than 10,000 barrels a day. As energy media readers will know, I've documented how they faced a capital crisis for the last 2 or 3 years. They've been going bankrupt. They've been failing. Their bankers basically are keeping them in business. And it seems to me, and see what you think, that in fact, changes to how, and the Prime Minister extracted a commitment from Jason Kenney, Prime Minister said so in his speech, that there would be changes to the way these liabilities are managed. I think is kind of how he put it. But that has dire consequences for the junior sector, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's no doubt. In a lot of ways, both the provincial and federal approach to this recognizes how the juniors are a lost cause. Neither of them are directing their aid trying to prop up those companies. They're just so far gone. That's an argument that I've been making for a long time. Nobody wants to acknowledge, but it's sort of implied in this response. And I think at least that much is positive. That's a lost cause, so they've shifted their attention to the medium-sized. There's new regulatory programs that are in the works that have been for many years. I assume that to be most of the response that's going to fill that promise to the feds. And even that new regulatory program is going to have consequences for juniors that they're not going to withstand in this climate. And so there is going to be a lot of failures this year. The question is, do those wells get transferred to the Orphan Well Association where industry funds the cleanup, or do they get consolidated to bigger companies for where they can continue sitting idle? And that's going to be the big question. We need to see that cleanup, not trying to keep this problem under the carpet.
I assume that your organization will be monitoring the process closely and and speaking publicly about if you spot anything that sets off the warning bells.
Yeah, no doubt. There's more details to come. There are some positive things. Both landowners and municipalities are going to be able to nominate wells for this inactive fund. And so problem wells are going to be a way to move them up the list, to have them higher up on the priority, which are positive things. But a lot of it is yet to be seen, and it's going to come down to how Kenny implements this money. And so we will be following the details as they come out closely, and trying to offer our analysis as quickly as we can.
The devil is always in the details. Regan, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights, and we'll be checking in with you regularly to see how this program is being implemented.
My pleasure. Thanks.